Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event. It figures to be an exceptional one that doesn't need any buildup.
Randy Moss, without even really being able to run as he shoots the moon to the fans here in Green Bay.
That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss.
I guess that's what I'm saying, Brooksy. You get that through your head?
I guess so.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a waste of time.
Well, then get the f*** out of here then.
Yeah. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
If I find out as a tape about what I just said, I'm going to kick your f***ing ass and whoever's associated with it.
It's seeing it. We're not going to use it.
Well, you got to tell people you got that f***ing microphone around.
Okay,
what the you think? You think I'm happy about getting 15-yard penalty? You got to be out your mind.
Wait a minute, there's something forming here. Forming. It says, what a question.
That's why I don't read the newspaper.
I'm always confident I whoop all of them. You're being extremely truculent. Whatever truculent means, if that's good, I'm that.
Hi once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into another edition of The Man in the Arena, The Press Box. When Major League Baseball spoke out first and said, if indeed the state of Georgia passed Senate Bill 202, and that was in the form of Tony Clark, the head of the Major League Baseball Players Association, there should have been no question whatsoever and no surprise whatsoever that indeed baseball would act. Because Tony Clark and many other athletes and many other athletic organizations and sports leagues are to this day now very firm in what they will say about social action within the states, within the cities, within their own governments, and certainly within the United States. So then in Atlanta, Georgia, when CBS 46 was reporting exactly what was happening as the bill was being passed, and then as Major League Baseball made the decision to pull the 2021 All-Star Game, quite frankly, there never should have been any surprise whatsoever.
Major League Baseball votes to move this summer's All-Star Game out of Atlanta. Chopper 46 was over the stadium an hour ago, and the signage was already up at Truist Park. The decision in response to Governor Brian Kemp signing State Bill 202 into law.
Many believe it disenfranchises minority voters. Well, just moments ago, the governor said Major League Baseball caved to fear, political opportunism, and liberal lies. Well, CBS 46 sports reporter Emily Gagnon in studio with us tonight with some of those breaking details.
Yeah, the decision isn't going over very well with many local officials. Major League Baseball decided to move the game, but the Braves organization says it wasn't their decision or their recommendation. The club saying they'll, quote, continue to stress the importance of equal voting opportunities, and we had hoped our city could use this event as a platform to enhance the discussion. Our city has always been known as a uniter, in divided times, and we will miss the opportunity to address issues that are important to our community, end quote. Public reaction is mixed.
Just think about it. Hank Aaron, John Lewis, Martin Luther King, what they stood for and what they fought for.
It's a shame, just like you said, to Martin Luther King and what John Lewis took his beatings for. You know, I just think that it's time, man, that we can allow ourselves to come together, man, as a unity.
The baseball game, you know, that should be handled by the sports guys and just, you know, leave it to them. So if you know, if some gets political, let it stay in the political arena.
Actually, this was handled by the sports guys. This was handled by the Major League Baseball Players Association and Major League Baseball itself. With regard to baseball and politics, we'll get into that a little bit later on because it seems right now that the biggest argument is that sports has no business whatsoever being involved in politics. Let's make a couple of other points here. For the Atlanta Braves not to get completely behind the decision by Major League Baseball, it has indeed left a sour taste in the mouths of many Atlantans and many Major League Baseball players because they felt that the Braves should have gotten right behind the announcement and said we are 100% fully behind Major League Baseball in what they are doing. Now, certainly the Braves aren't going to do that, partially because they're going to wind up losing money. But second, of course, let's bring into this the Atlanta Braves, an organization that still has as their nickname a name that is considered to be offensive, racist by so many, and certainly there are many Native American groups who to this day would like the Braves to change that nickname. Let's not even go to the Cleveland Indians and so many others, because that's another discussion altogether. But this once again proves that there is a political statement here when it comes to sports itself. Now, regarding the fact that the game is now gone, let's address the All-Star Game in and of itself. When I was a kid, the All-Star Game wasn't really that big a deal. I mean, come on. The All-Star Game was where guys went for a few days. Everybody else took 3 days off. And you went to the All-Star Game, certainly. You were feted, you were there. People were watching you. You were able to perform. It was a show. But it really, in essence, was not that big a deal to a lot of the Major League Baseball players themselves. It didn't mean anything. Well, now, of course, it does mean something. It means, of course, money. In many other ways, World Series, ramifications, so much more. It also means money to the local community. But the All-Star Game in and of itself still is nothing more than a show. It's fun. It's giggles and grins. That's all it's ever meant to be. So think for a moment, if you will, how something that is really so harmless in so many ways is creating such furor. When the mayor of Atlanta decided to make a comment on this, CBS 46 was there to do a follow-up on those who were then starting to understand what was happening and starting to grasp the ramifications of what baseball had done.
From the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, quote, just as elections have consequences, so do the actions of those who are elected. Unfortunately, the removal of the MLB All-Star Game from Georgia is likely the first of many dominoes to fall until the unnecessary barriers put in place to restrict access to the ballot box are removed.
The move causing a lot of consternation in Cobb County, home of Truist Park, and commissioners recently agreed to allocate $2 million for security and other necessary costs to bring the All-Star Game here.
Hope Ford is in Cobb County, where the commission chair spoke with reporters just a short time ago. Hope, she is disappointed.
That's right. Cobb County Chairwoman Lisa Cupid says she is disappointed, but she understands. She said she appealed to the MLB to obviously keep the game here, but she said they've obviously made their decision. And despite that decision, she did say their conversations were fruitful, although she didn't go into too many details about what was discussed. Now, Cupid did say that she is deflated, and she was really concerned about the economy, the travel and tourism, and those venues and businesses that were really hoping to make up for what they have lost during the pandemic, or really hoping to benefit from the game being here. So Cupid did say that that is a blow to the county and Georgia, but she says she wasn't surprised by the decision because of everything that has been discussed in the past couple of days. She did add that she believes that right now would be a good time to really look at some of the challenges, and those were her words, look at some of the challenges with the legislation that led up to this decision.
I think we have opportunity to rise from this blow that we have been dealt, but to take advantage of this opportunity to, again, address policies and concerns that have been with us. And I think we have what it takes to be able to turn this around and, again, appeal to all of our residents and businesses to help us move forward from this.
And on top of that, Cupid says 2 weeks ago they did set aside funds to address some of the public safety concerns that would come along with the event. And because of that, if anything has been spent, she said that they will have to recoup those expenditures. So they will be having conversations with the league to see whether or not they will have to get some of those funds back.
All right. Hope Ford reporting in Cobb County. Thank you, Hope.
Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred says his decision follows thoughtful discussion with current and former players, among others, in light of Georgia's election law. He states the best way to demonstrate our values as a sport is by relocating this year's All-Star Game and draft. He goes on to pledge support for voting rights, saying and stating that Major League Baseball fundamentally supports voting rights for all Americans and opposes restrictions to the ballot box. 11 Alive's Alex Glaze continues our team coverage. He is live at Truist Park in Cobb County with the Braves' reaction to today's news.
Yeah, Jeff, this all started with Major League Baseball's Players Association discussing possibly moving the game out of Georgia to send a message about the new voting law. And now that that decision has been made for the All-Star Game to be moved, the Braves released a statement earlier today saying that the team is deeply disappointed by the decision of Major League Baseball to move its 2021 All-Star Game. This was neither our decision nor our recommendation, and we are saddened that fans will not be able to see the event in our city. Unfortunately, businesses, employees, and fans in Georgia are the victims of this decision. Now, Commissioner Manfred said baseball will still honor the memory of Hank Aaron during the All-Star Game wherever they decide to play it. They also plan to continue to support local communities in Atlanta as a part of baseball's All-Star Legacy project. So now the question is, Jeff, what's next for Georgia? Will there be other leagues or companies to follow Major League Baseball's ruling?
And that is certainly going to happen. It's interesting how now we talk about the fact of what happened and when it happened. Because Georgia Governor Brian Kemp had an opportunity to not only throw Senate Bill 202 into the mix and to make it a law, but he had a chance to do it at a different time. He decided to go ahead and throw it at this time, knowing full well that it would create a fight with Major League Baseball and with the Major League Baseball Players Association. He also knows that it's going to create an issue with Delta Airlines and so many others who call Atlanta and Georgia their home. With regard to optics, Major League Baseball had absolutely no choice whatsoever in doing this because they are an organization that makes their money from across America and around the world. They could not be seen giving a nod, giving a wink and a nod, if you will, to something which is considered by so many to be so egregious and so wrong. They had to do this. Kemp is the guy who pushed the button and decided that this was the time he was going to pick the fight. Let's get to the local economy for a moment. The Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 2021 was not going to be a multi-billion-dollar profit margin for the city of Atlanta and the area. COVID-19 has changed that. There were fewer people that were going to be there. Now, granted, it hurts the local economy, and the local economy could have certainly used the business. But is it a death blow? Not in any sense of the imagination whatsoever. Had there been a time to do it, this was the proper time. And this was the best time for everybody. The recoup of money is going to happen over time, as it will with every single business. But baseball could not afford to do this at this time. I mentioned Governor Brian Kemp. When it comes down to Senate Bill 202, there is a tremendous amount of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and flat-out lies being told about it. After this decision was made by Major League Baseball, the governor appeared on WSB-TV in Atlanta and made his case in a rather fiery fashion.
Governor Kemp, thank you for being with us. Baseball's Commissioner Rob Manfred said that this is all about taking a stance against ballot box restrictions, referencing the newly passed voting legislation here in Georgia. What's your reaction?
Well, Jovita, thanks for having me. My reaction is Major League Baseball has caved to the cancel culture and a bunch of liberal lies, quite honestly. He didn't cite one specific part of the bill that he disagrees with, and it's because Joe Biden and Stacey Abrams continue to lie about the Election Integrity Act that I just signed. And I believe for your viewers at home, you might as well get ready, because now that they're coming after your baseball game, they're going to come after your business. They're going to come after your way of life. But I will tell you, I'm not backing down. This is a good bill that provides more access, especially on the weekends, and many other things that I've been saying for days. And it's really a sad day for hardworking Georgians, for baseball fans like myself, that Major League Baseball just caved to the pressure.
Governor, you said cave to the pressure, but also during the last election cycle, you and many others said that there was no fraud here, that there were no problems with the elections here in Georgia from November through the runoff and then January. So if people feel like there was nothing wrong, then what needs to be changed? And so if they want to make changes, how is that caving to pressure?
Well, I guess Major League Baseball doesn't support us adding additional days for people to vote early, is all I can say. Jovita, you got an organization that's headquartered in New York where you have to have an excuse to be able to vote an absentee ballot. In Georgia, you do not. In New York, they have 10 days of early voting where people can vote early. In Georgia, you have 17. And now if a county takes advantage of the 2 optional Sundays that was added in this bill, you'll have 19 potential days that people can vote early. That's 9 days more than New York. Yet the commissioner's pulling the game from here, hurting our small business owners because he simply doesn't know what's in the bill. The pressure from the White House and from the organization that Stacey Abrams runs, you know, they're up there lying. Nobody will call them out. What the president said the other day, he got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post. You know, the mechanics of the election this year, there was definitely problems. The legislature, I think, did a great job of wading through those and making some good changes that's going to help the county elections officials. Some of the things in the bill was recommended by the Association County Commissioners of Georgia. The photo ID or voter requirement we've had since 2006 in Georgia is going to speed up the absentee voting process by mail at the local level so that results can be reported quicker. All these people that are bowing to the cancel culture, none of them have cited one example of why you should be boycotting this game. I asked them that. They don't mention that. It's just the political pressure that's on them. And it's a good thing for your viewers to know that that is coming to your house and your neighborhood now. But I will tell you, we will continue to fight that because we are on the right side of this, and the truth will set you free.
It is extremely difficult in anything we talk about regarding sports or anything else these days to not be political. I can say right here that in this show and any other time, this is a sports-based program, but we are talking about a political issue. And I can tell you, as everybody else will, let's try not to be political. Guess what? It's impossible to do because it makes no difference what I say or how I say it. I'm going to be seen by certain people as being too liberal, too conservative, too right, too left, too incorrect, too proper, too Democratic, too Republican. It makes no difference. But what we have to do is deal in facts. Let's try that. And let's deal specifically with Governor Brian Kemp just said. The governor is like politicians everywhere else, whether it be a governor, a mayor, a city council person. He is spitting out cliches as quick and as well as he can because cliches will cover up the real intent of anything anybody is trying to say. Instead of answering questions specifically, the governor deals in cliches. I want to give credit to Jovia Moore of WSB, who asked the proper question. When she said, well, wait a minute, Governor, you said, and we learned that there was no fraud and no problems in the election last year, so why change anything? It is at that point that the governor goes off. He takes shots at New York City, takes shots at what their laws are, looks at and takes shots at Joe Biden and takes shots at Stacey Abrams, and then mentions cancel culture on and off. He is not answering the questions because that's not efficient when it comes to answering any sort of issue. Try and take it off the rails. Do a little whataboutism. And that's exactly what he's doing here. The issue at hand is what happened in 2020 with regard to the elections in the state of Georgia. And the fact that, as we heard stated on the WSB interview, there were no issues, so why change anything? Well, it's a good question. What exactly has been changed in this law? So much has been done and so much has been talked about. These are the facts. The law increases the state power over counties. Now, don't forget, Donald Trump, the former president, was angered at the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, when Raffensperger refused to accommodate the baseless claims of widespread voter fraud. Raffensperger was in charge. Now, according to this bill, the biggest issue here is he can be pulled by the state legislature, whom, if they are Democratic or Republican, can appoint a nonpartisan chair. Do you really think for a minute it's going to be nonpartisan? They will replace the Secretary of State. That goes directly back to what happened in the election where there was a problem that was complained about by the president. This new law limits how many ballot drop boxes each county can have, how many hours and days the boxes can be open, and where they may be located. That is a voter suppression issue. There are certain areas, and while the governor did say that Joe Biden got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post on making a statement, and it was about the opening and closing of certain polling places, the president was incorrect, but he was not incorrect about everything, that there are places and issues where a specific time period for early voting from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. does indeed exist. This shrinks the length of the runoff campaigns and the early voting period. This eliminates 2 of the 3 weeks of early voting that used to be required in runoffs that people were using to get to the polls because they couldn't guarantee they'd be there on a certain day. Now, this shortens the duration of the absentee voting period. It no longer has a signature match to check identity of absentee voters, which frankly to many people is a good idea because signatures can be forged. People must instead provide a driver's license number on state-approved ID, or the last 4 digits of their social security number, which to many again seems to be a good idea to stop potential voter fraud. But here's a couple of things which the governor is not going to mention. It is now a misdemeanor to provide food or drink within a polling place, within 150 feet of the building housing the polling location, or within 25 feet of any voter standing in line. In other words, no food, no water. If the lines are long, which indeed they do, and the governor bemoans the fact that he says because of the Democrats the lines were long. No, the lines are long because people are coming out to vote. But now you can't give them any food, you can't give them any water, or you're going to get arrested. And counties may no longer use mobile voting facilities. That's huge because in many places, in many areas, those mobile voting facilities are all people have. This is all about getting the vote out to as many people as possible. And the last time I checked, and so many others have checked, whether you're Republican or Democrat, doesn't it make sense that here in America, what we specifically want to do is make sure that everybody can vote? It's what America is meant to be. People around the world right now are struggling, are dying in order to vote in an election, yet we in America sometimes take it for granted. Here we had in America in 2020 and in Georgia, many other places, people who decided, damn it, that's it, I'm going to get out and vote this time because it's important. I need to let my voice be heard. And the voice was heard. The problem was in the state of Georgia, it was not heard to the liking of a certain group of people, so they decided to change the laws. That leads us to Major League Baseball. That leads us to the All-Star Game. Now again, what I just said is going to be excoriated by so many people who are going to say, Ed, you're just a lousy liberal and you're just talking out of the side of your mouth and you're only spitting out one side of the argument. No, I'm not. What I just talked about right there are the absolute facts. And I dare anyone to tell me that those facts are wrong. Those are in the bill. That is exactly what it means, and that's what pushed this issue. Let's get back now to the businesses. Because while the All-Star Game is gone, there are people who are now worried about the fact that, well, gee, we should have had this here because local businesses need this. They've got to have this. We've got to get back on our feet after COVID-19. And indeed, they are exactly right. In this CNBC report, Shep Smith interviews Kevin Blackstone, who is a longtime sports writer and an educator, about not only this issue, but others with regard to the fact that, yeah, the law is bad in the eyes of many. What baseball did is proper in the eyes of many, but is this not hurting other people?
Kevin Blackstone now, Washington Post sports columnist, professor of journalism at the University of Maryland. Kevin, thank you. Major League Baseball making a big statement here. Were you surprised they took it?
No, I wasn't surprised because, Shep, if we just look at recent history, we can look at your state, your university, Ole Miss, which, last January, they were told by the NCAA and other states like them that they would no longer be able to host NCAA events as long as the Confederate banner was flying. By September, after 126 years in Mississippi, that banner came down, and now Mississippi is back in the fold to host NCAA events. And, baseball could look to the NBA, which took a similar stance on its All-Star Game in North Carolina one year in 2017 when it pulled it from being there over the so-called bathroom bill. So these have been successful boycotts in the past. There's a long history of them, and I was not at all surprised that Major League Baseball took this bold step.
Your point is well taken and welcome. I will add, that state flag hadn't even flown over the flagship university's campus for years because that banner was in it. It finally got changed. On another matter, Stacey Abrams and both of Georgia's senators argue that boycotts actually hurt the very people the law suppresses. Is that point fair?
Sure, that point's fair. I mean, I'm sure that there are businesses in the city of Atlanta that are looking forward to that particular game being there and the revenue that it can generate. But this isn't just about, one weekend. This isn't just about one game. This is about many, many years. This is about voting rights. This is about the foundation of democracy. And as you just laid out brilliantly, going through that 95-page bill that Governor Kim signed, there are a lot of problems in there that strike at the heart of voter suppression in this country. And, I will say this, Georgia is not alone. And there's some other states that are going to have to suffer these same sorts of boycotts. But it's for the good. It's for the long term. It's not for the short term.
Yeah, Kevin, short on time, but how much pressure now on other leagues and organizations to pull their businesses? Or does this give them cover to do so?
There will be a lot of pressure. This is not covered to do so, right? This is a lot of pressure to go ahead and do this. And I would even point out that HBCUs in the city of Atlanta and throughout the South who hold their Battle of the Bands in Atlanta, sponsored by Honda, might want to do this as well.
Yep, I'm sure they're listening.
Kevin Blackstone makes a couple of brilliant points. First of all, this is not about a Major League Baseball All-Star Game weekend. Issues such as this, social issues such as this, which strike across the heart of America, are there for everybody, but are also there to deal with larger issues. It's not just about one weekend. It's about the next weekend, the next month, the next year, the next 10 years in America, and changing what many people believe is wrong. So for those to focus on the fact that it simply is one weekend and Major League Baseball should be held accountable for that, you're again not getting the message. And you're not understanding that when it comes down to fighting for something, to protesting something, you protest for the long haul, not for the short haul. It's also interesting to note there, if you looked at the graphic, for those of you watching our show, for those of you listening to it, I'll make the point that Stacey Abrams, who has been excoriated by the governor and so many others, is one who said to other companies, don't boycott Georgia because of this law. She and many others are saying that indeed we know that you're angry, and indeed we know that you'd like to take some action. But don't hurt the other people in the state because of that. Let's take action. Let's try and figure out a way around this. Let's see what we can do to make things better without affecting as many people as we can. No matter how this is taken, this is going to affect many people, perhaps millions of people, but there are those who feel that it needs to be done. At the core of this, no matter how it's sliced, Major League Baseball is looking at what has been a long-term history of racism in the game itself. Let's be honest, we can do a whole show on this, and we probably will one day. Major League Baseball has always been one of the most racist sports in America. Let's go back to the 1800s, where indeed black Americans were taken and shoved into the corner and were not allowed to be a part of the game. They were not only excoriated, they were considered to be little more than slaves, even though slavery had long since ended. Black players weren't allowed to be in the game. The Negro Leagues were looked at nothing more than a place for guys to hang out and hit baseballs, and they weren't very good at what they did. And had Jackie Robinson and other black players, the first of their kind, who had gotten into baseball, had they failed, Major League Baseball, there are many people within the organizations who would have said, see, we told you, the black man can't play baseball. That's likely what would have happened. Baseball has had a history of racism for so long. Other sports have as well. But for the terrible nature of how the African-American male has been treated in Major League Baseball and treated in this sport, baseball now has to look back at its own history, and they have to decide that something like this action that is taken, needs to be taken in light of continuing to try to make good on a history of racism in the game. Now, there are those of you who are going to say, come on, Ed, you really got to play here because baseball's not that bad. Well, of course not. Not if you look at it in the scope of 2021 and the eyes of today. You could possibly say that. But I mentioned, of course, Jackie Robinson, Rachel Robinson, his wife, whom I knew very well, interviewed many times, and got to hear many of the stories of what Jack had experienced while he was coming up in Major League Baseball, and many other athletes that I've spoken to over the years who have told me in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, in the double O's, how they are treated, how there is still racism in sports today. And it's not just baseball, it's many other sports as well. But a lot of it comes back to baseball. I can tell you during my time in Boston when I was there in the early aughts, there were people there who still talked about the fact, and these were players and former players, who talked about the racism on the Red Sox in the 80s and the 90s. That wasn't that far away. That was only a few years past. And it wasn't just the Red Sox organization, and it wasn't just Red Sox fans. It was all across Major League Baseball and all across the fan base as well. For those of you who may question what I'm saying about Major League Baseball, still to this day having to make good on a racist history, let me bring this to the fore, because many people won't remember this. How many of you remember what happened in 1987? There was a show on ABC TV on the network called Nightline. Ted Koppel was the anchor, and they dealt in very specific, hardcore stories at the time, sort of like an every night 60 Minutes. Well, one night, Al Campanis was the guest, the general manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, let's consider, this was 1987. We were supposed to be an enlightened people in 1987, but as Al Campanis showed us, we weren't, and baseball was far from being racially enlightened.
Why is it that there are no black managers, no black general managers, no black owners?
Well, Mr. Koppel, there have been some black managers, but I really can't answer that question directly. The only thing I can say is that you have to pay your dues when you become a manager. Generally, you have to go to minor leagues. There's not very much pay involved, and some of the better known black players have been able to get into other fields and make a pretty good living in that way.
Yeah, but you know in your heart of hearts, and we're going to take a break for a commercial, you know that that's a lot of baloney. I mean, there are a lot of black players, there are a lot of great black baseball men who would dearly love to be in managerial positions. And I guess what I'm really asking you is to, peel it away a little bit. Just tell me, why do you think it is? Is there still that much prejudice in baseball today?
No, I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that they may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager.
You really believe that?
Well, I don't say that they're all of them, but they certainly are short. How many quarterbacks do you have? How many pitchers do you have that are black? It's same
yeah, but I mean,
applies.
I got to tell you, that sounds like the same kind of garbage we were hearing 40 years ago about players when they were saying, not really cut out. You remember the days, hit a black football player in the knees, and no, that really sounds like garbage if you forget to say so.
It's not garbage, Mr. Koppel, because I played on a college team, and the center fielder was black, and then the backfield at NYU with the fullback who was black. Never knew the difference of whether he was black or white. We were teammates. So it just might be that why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
Oh, it may just be that they don't have access to all the country clubs and the pool.
Wow. 1987. In case you missed it, Roger Kahn, the author on the other side, was just sitting there flabbergasted. There's the general manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1987 talking about the fact that blacks don't float, and also saying that black players may not have some of the necessities to be Major League Baseball managers, and then backing up, well, I played with them and they were good players. Al Campanis, as the graphic noted on that, resigned 2 days later. He had to. He was exposed as being a blatant racist. And people knew it. But people also then started to understand more about Major League Baseball. This is not how just Al Campanis felt. This was how many people in baseball felt. And to this day, it's how many people feel when it comes to black coaches, black managers, black quarterbacks, you name it if you will. It still is this seething hate and racism that boils underneath the surface. And that's what Major League Baseball is having to take in here as part of what's going on in Georgia. When they look at the new law, when they look at Senate Bill 202, and they look at how it disproportionately may affect minorities, they have to say out loud that we can't allow this to happen because, quite frankly, we as Major League Baseball, we've been involved in this in the past. Not in the voting legislation, of course, but we've had our racist histories before. Baseball is still in many ways making up for it. And there are people who understand this to this day. So don't try to tell me that Major League Baseball doesn't have a racist history, because they do. So let's see if we can maybe get past that. But what Al Campanis said, and watching him fumble, and watching him try to make up for the interview, and watching him try to desperately get past what he said, was in and of itself part of the problem. It's there. It exists. And that's the reason why, to many people, what Major League Baseball did was exactly what was needed to make the point, to make the statement. And certainly people may be affected by it, but you've got to take a stand sooner or later, and you have to say what you believe is the right thing. Now, both baseball is excoriated for this by so many people and hated. I, of course, will receive a lot of the same injurious verbal texts as they will for basically saying what I'm saying here today. But what I'm doing is pointing out nothing more than the truth. There is a racist attitude there, and it has to be dealt with. And in this case, it is being dealt with. Why? Because we're talking about it. There's attention being brought to it right now. People are going to start thinking about it. Businesses will start thinking about it. Fans will start thinking about it. And sooner or later, the gears begin to move and everything begins to change. That's what you hope will happen. What we also need to bring into this are the athletes themselves. There is a case that can be made here with what's happening in Atlanta that once again we are seeing professional athletes being involved in social change, standing up, saying the right thing, doing the right thing, at least bringing attention to what they believe is wrong in America today. I've said this many times. I believe that in many cases, social change, real social change, begins with athletes, entertainers, and those who people follow. Why? Because they're famous. Their words are noticed by hundreds and millions of people. And certainly, while there are those who look at certain athletes and call them role models, they're not role models, but maybe they stand for something. And maybe those words they stand for, not all the time, but maybe those words they stand for need to be said out loud. Let's be honest, there's a lot of athletes and entertainers who say really ridiculously stupid, inane, knuckle-headed things that nobody should pay any attention to. But every now and then, in the grand scheme of things, athletes are involved in enacting social change. I want you to catch this report. This is from Good Morning America in 2017, and it talks specifically about this issue, about how athletes are quite often at the forefront of social change.
All morning we've been talking about President Trump tangling publicly with sports stars, especially the NFL players who refused to stand during the national anthem.
And we want to dig deeper into the history of how sports and social activism have become intertwined. So let's go to ABC's Chris Conley in Los Angeles with more for us this morning. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Paula and Dan. How are you? We've seen a surge of late in activism by athletes, but heading back to the 1960s, especially in the area of race, there's been a history of figures in sports taking the lead, raising awareness, sparking discussion, or calling for direct action.
People call it Black Power. Of course, I'm black. Of course, we represented power.
The 1968 Summer Olympics. This would be one of the galvanizing images of its time. U.S. medalist Tommy Smith and John Carlos on the podium.
It was a cry for freedom. Here, notice me. I'm in need. What are you in need of? Justice.
This is a tradition in the African American community. This is a tradition across the country. We've always had athletes to use their platforms to speak out around issues of social justice.
Also in the 1960s, it was Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, becoming a voice for black empowerment and dissent, stripped of his title when he declared himself a conscientious objector.
You my opposing, I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
Billie Jean King would become a leader of the women's movement, advocating for equal rights and opportunity in her sport and beyond. In 1996, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf did not stand for the anthem, later opting to stand and pray silently. 20 years later, it was the 49ers' Colin Kaepernick doing so, joined by other NFLers and by soccer standout Megan Rapinoe. And in an unprecedented role for the best player in an American team sport, the NBA's LeBron James has embraced social activism in public statements, on social media, even on the court itself.
LeBron James has a sense of his social consciousness.
It's time to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing to create change?
And as a result of that, he is using his platform to speak out around issues that's impacting the community that he is a part of.
Today, all eyes will be on the NFL's players to see how they respond to yesterday's developments, and on the league's teams, none of which has offered Colin Kaepernick a contract for the 2017 season. Dan and Paula?
Yeah, this historical context is incredibly important.
Thank you, Chris. I was going to say none have offered a contract to Colin Kaepernick, even though Jay Williams brought up earlier his numbers better than some of the starters and almost all the backups out there.
The story of Colin Kaepernick is now an old one. Never played another down in the National Football League. I still go back to the time as a child when I learned more about Muhammad Ali, and then later in life when I got a chance to interview Muhammad and befriend him. Not to the point where we called each other on the phone, but where I talked to him every chance I did, every chance I could, and where we talked about so many other things, and where he continued to say that that was exactly the point. You won't stand up for my religion. You don't like the fact that I'm a Muslim, yet at the same point you want me to go kill people I've never met before. That was what he talked about. But Ali was in here trying to create, and he did create, social change. And now it's athletes like LeBron James and others who are saying, what are we doing to create change? Not just sit and let the standard every day go around, but what are we doing to bring attention to what's happening in America today? And the point is, we can change our minds, which is something that people really don't want to think about at times with all this, while the athletes are taking the time to be part of social change. And I want to bring up Mike Yastrzemski, who's the grandson of the great Carl Yastrzemski. Mike is currently in the San Francisco Giants. In the 2020 season, Mike Yastrzemski kneeled for the national anthem because he felt it was important. In the 2021 season, Yastrzemski has said he is not going to kneel because he feels as if the point has been made. So he doesn't think he has to kneel again. That is his choice. He is allowed to make that choice, and he should not be held to derision for what his choice is. He's made it. Okay, you make your choice, you move on. Because at the same time, we get to go back and revisit what happened in 2020. Gabe Kapler, the manager of the San Francisco Giants. I want to play this clip, and this comes from July of 2020, where Kapler was talking and asking and then answering the questions about that decision to kneel. This was the criteria and his reasoning behind it.
Go ahead, Kerry.
Hey, Gabe, would you mind taking us through the decision to kneel before the anthem or during the anthem tonight and the conversation that you had with the team ahead of time and kind of the support that you wanted to express for players on both sides who wanted to kneel and who wanted to stand?
Sure. I'll start by saying that we've had a lot of conversations about the anthem over the course of the last 72 hours. And when I say we, I mean our coaching staff and our players. We connected with small groups of players. We connected with players individually and had meaningful conversations about this topic. In addition, I think many of us reached out to people in other organizations and had a feel for how we could help amplify the voices of the Black community and other marginalized communities. And I spoke to the group today and I gave them essentially two messages. The first message was that our coaching staff and our organization would support any statement that they wanted to make. If they kneeled for the anthem, we would support that. If they stood for the anthem, we would support that too. And we wouldn't pass judgment on them for making any statement or standing up for what they believe in or expressing themselves. And the second message I wanted to share was that, you know, what my plans were. And I did that because I wanted them to know that I wasn't pleased with the way our country has handled police brutality. And I told them that I wanted to amplify their voices and I wanted to amplify the voice of the Black community and marginalized communities as well. And so I told them that I wanted to use my platform to demonstrate my dissatisfaction with the way we've handled racism in our country. I wanted to demonstrate my dissatisfaction with our clear systemic racism in our country. And I wanted them to know that they got to make their own decisions and we would respect and support those decisions. And I wanted them to feel safe in speaking up. And so we had these kind of discussions for, the last several days, and we'll continue to have them. As we mentioned, when we were still in quarantine, we wanted to continue the difficult discussions and make them a part of the fabric of our clubhouse.
We live in tumultuous times, and these are times where people need to speak out and need to use their pulpits, if you will. Donald Trump, as President of the United States, used his pulpit for what he felt was right, and his followers are those who support him on it. There are, of course, his many detractors who still look at the disinformation, misinformation, the propaganda, and the stunning number of lies that he told in using his pulpit. But still, he had that ability. These are major league athletes. And not only that, but many high-end college athletes are doing it. High school athletes are doing it as well, where they are kneeling, where they are taking the knee, where they are deciding to show their disdain for what is happening in America right now. Gabe Kapler is right. It's time to stand up and say something. And that's why I need to tell you that it's important that these athletes say something. When everybody says, and I read this constantly, you're just an athlete, shut up and play the game. They're also Americans. They're also human beings. They're also people that have an opportunity to say things that can be impactful, that can change the way we live, that can change America for the better, that can make us all think. And that's exactly what's happening. When Mike Yastrzemski says he's not going to kneel this year, he goes back to last year in 2020, where he did it because he wanted to show respect and bring attention to what was happening in America. This year he's decided that he's not going to kneel. Okay, that's his decision. We can, but we shouldn't actually hammer down on him. He's decided to go his own way, as so many others have. So when people, individuals, reach out and try to make a change, we need to at least listen. We need to consider the facts behind it. We need to consider the reality behind why they do it. So as Major League Baseball makes a decision to move the All-Star Game out of Atlanta, instead of listening to demagogues such as the governor of Georgia or others who follow him, or even those on the other side, the Democratic side, who twist this into something that fits their own narrative, we need to look at what the facts are. We need to look at what is actually being said and why it's being said. And we need to dig a little bit deeper, because athletes have an opportunity to change America. And many times they change America for the better. What's wrong with that? In actuality, nothing. They can play the game. They can speak out. They can make us all think twice, 3 times, maybe a 4th time about what's happening. And maybe then we can come to a decision which, for all of us, will make America truly greater than it is today. I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Man in the Arena, the Press Box. Don't forget to join us on audio podcast and on YouTube. Until next time, rock on, true believers. See ya. Be a part of The Man in the Arena. Join us on social media at Berliner Speaks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, all live shows debut on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. As for those live shows on YouTube, you can find those at edberlinerlive.com. But every show in the Man in the Arena series can be seen at welcometothearena.com. Talk business. Join me on LinkedIn by searching out Ed Berliner. The Man in the Arena is available on all major audio podcast platforms, including iTunes, iHeart, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, and Pandora. The Man in the Arena is a copyrighted production of Entourage Management, LLC and Entourage Media. It may not be used in any form without the expressed written permission of these entities and or their legal representatives.